Hey everyone, this is Dr. Brandon Crawford. Thank you for joining us here at the Team Luke Hope for Minds Conference 2020. I appreciate you being here with us. And so today I'm going to talk about the use of laser and light therapy and how that can be applied in various rehab settings. There's a lot of different ways that I could have taken this lecture. What I really want to do is really give you the nuts and bolts of how laser and light therapy works. That way you can then apply it to whatever situation you need to. Because ultimately this modality is so varied in how it can affect your nervous system, your overall health, your body. And so that's what I want to do, is give you the nuts and bolts. So let me switch to a screen share here. And we'll get started. All right, here we go. So this is me. So my specialty is developmental functional neurology. My primary licensure is chiropractic. I'm co-founder of Shed Light, which is the company that sells the lasers that I'm going to be talking about today. I'm also founder of the Austin Center of Developing Minds outside of Austin, Texas. I have various other business business projects going on right now, so I'd like to stay nice and busy. But these are some things that I'm involved in here. So that's me. If you want to follow me on Instagram, you get to see how I'm using these cool strategies, these lasers, and all this functional neurology stuff. So follow along there at bcrawforddc. Also on Facebook, Brandon Crawford on Facebook. So who is Shed Light? Well, we're a group of doctors that really just want to help people. This whole thing started, several years ago whenever I was doing consulting in Jordan in the Middle East, and I was brought over there to ultimately help kids with autism and various other types of autism spectrum disorders. And when I was over there, I noticed that there were so many kids with very, very severe brain injuries, infections, autoimmune diseases, and all these things that were just being lumped into the autism spectrum. And it just wasn't, really accurate. But basically I saw these kids and I said, man, I need to find some type of modality that doesn't cost a ton of money for these people, because they can't really afford, a lot of supplements, a lot of medication and all this kind of stuff. And I need something that's going to change the brain, change the metabolism, help infections, help with autoimmune disease, so on and so forth. And I've been using laser therapy my entire career. And so I knew what it did. I knew what it had the potential to do. And so I partnered up with my friend and colleague, Dr. Damian Griswold, and we said, you know what? There's a huge need in the market, because our big thing is education. We like to teach people, and you're going to see that throughout this lecture and then the other lectures that I do. You're going to see that we like to empower you. We like to teach you why you need to do this, how you need to do this, so on and so forth. We never, ever, ever, ever want to just sell a product, period. We're not going to do that. That's not what we do. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help people. We're trying to educate people. So we hope that you'll join our movement and, come along for the ride. Some disclaimers. So as I mentioned, I am co-founder of Shed Light. Obviously, I have financial interest in the company and any products sold, so on and so forth. Obviously, this information is for educational purposes only. Not intended to diagnose, treat, manage, cure, or any of that kind of stuff. So I'll quote where I get my information. This is just a short list of where I'm going to quote from for this lecture. Okay, so I like this slide. I've used this slide many times because when it comes to laser and light therapy, all right, when it comes to photobiomodulation, oftentimes this is the perception that it gives. It's a very mystified modality. And the reason, in my opinion, that it's so mystifying is because so many companies are really just out there trying to sell a product. And so they'll make claims. They'll make claims like, if you use anything besides our product, it's going to hurt you. They'll use claims like, oh, if you dose too high, it's going to cause harm. Or if you need super pulsed. If you don't use super pulsed, you're not using the latest and greatest, which is really just a load of whatever. But and so there's all these marketing claims, and that's just not fair to the market, because this is kind of some complicated stuff. And it really does take, digging into the research, digging into this information to really understand that those are really just marketing ploys. And so that's what, again, I'm trying to give you the nuts and bolts. I want you to make your own decisions. I want you to understand how laser and light therapy works, and then you can make your own decisions, okay? So that's what we're gonna do. So what is this thing called photobiomodulation? So let's break it down. So you have the word photo, that means light, right? You have bio, which is biology or life. And then you have modulation, which is to alter, change, or adjust. So basically, photobiomodulation is changing life with light. That's ultimately what it means. And this is just a little, window into my office, how I change life with light. So this guy, this is Scott. He has a kind of a sad story. He was in the Army. He served several years in the Army, and he was home on leave, and someone had a car accident on the highway. It was pretty bad wreck, and so he pulled over to help. It was a mom and a child. He got them out of the car, saved their life. And then the mom said, "Hey, I left my purse in the got. Can you go back and get my purse?" And so he started going across the highway, got hit by another car going 70 miles an hour. And so now he's got a lot of issues. But the reason I'm showing you this is because, yes, I'm using a lot of lasers. Nothing is random. Everything is put on a specific location for a reason. And what we're doing is going to be explained over the next several slides. But he's gotten dramatic results in a short period of time. There he is, smiling and happier. He had a lot of issues with rage, anger, and that kind of thing. And he's doing much better with that now. Starting to be able to communicate with his children, his wife, who is one of the, definitely an angel that walks the planet. His wife is reporting just, different types of gains every day. So we're just so happy to be able to help him. And, we see it, and they credit the lasers with a big part of his healing journey. Now, this is going to give, again, just a little snippet of a window into my office and how we're using pulse radio frequency here, but what we're doing is we're activating certain networks in the brain, and then we're lasering over those networks as we activate them, because we know from the literature that the networks that have the higher metabolism, that are more active, are going to be most affected by the laser. And so that's a little mantra that I've come up with, is turn the network on and then laser it. And so this is a little window in of what we're doing. Again, nothing random here, all right? We're doing everything specifically and targeting a certain location. These are two of my favorite families, the Boytums and the Carlsons. Love these kids, love these families. I had the privilege to work with them. And again, we're just seeing massive gains. Now, obviously, they're doing all the right things, right? They're doing HBOT, they're doing stem cells, they're doing various types of home care. They're doing functional neurology, they're doing laser therapy. They're doing everything, they're doing it right, okay? So I had great honor to work with them. I love these families, guys. All right, so some nomenclature, because I want you to understand what I'm talking about as I say these words, right? So photons, these are just massless packets of energy, okay, that can act as both particles and waves, which is kind of cool. These photons have an energy expressed in electron volts, right? So they express energy. The energy of each photon depends on the wavelength. Don't worry about that for now, all right? For example, a red photon has about 2 electron volts of energy, while a blue has 3 electron volts, right? So whenever you have a laser or a light, anything that produces light, you turn it on, what shines out, what floods out are photons, all right? Those are photons coming out, all right? So these photons have to be absorbed to have an effect biologically. Photons like to smash into electrons, and we're going to talk more about that later and why that's so important, okay? On this slide, I really just mainly want you to focus on effective dose, all right? So the effective dose is the dose that produces a therapeutic response at the target tissue, okay? What you're going to see quoted in the literature is the next line: irradiance, power density, intensity, fluence. Those are all kind of the same thing. And it's the total energy delivered per unit area at the tissue surface, right? So if I take my laser again and I put it here on my head, okay, the fluence is what's measured at the skin. Well, that's great. But I want to know what's going on at the target tissue, which is my brain. Okay, that's going to be the effective dose. And the way to measure that is with clinical skills, is with being able to monitor things like pulse oximetry, oxygen, heart rate, primitive reflexes, muscle tone, changes in demeanor and personality and affect and all of these things, right? So that's going to determine your effective dose. It sounds hard, but we can really break this down for you, okay? Those other things, you know, you can read over that. Just again, various types of nomenclature to know. A lot of people ask me, what's the difference in laser versus LED? Here's a very simplified answer. Laser diodes are like a Bugatti, LEDs are like a Kia, all right? Now look, they're both cars, all right? They're both going to get you from point A to point B, all right? So they do very, very similar things, but one is going to get you there a lot faster and a lot more efficiently and get the job done faster, okay? So that's going to be the Bugatti, obviously, or the laser diodes. There's several things that do kind of differentiate these two modalities, right? So the coherence, being able to keep a very strict or tight range on the wavelength, where LEDs will vary up to 20 nanometers, where a laser diode will only vary up to 5 nanometers. So, you know, there are differences. There's research that says they're the same, but then there's research that also says LEDs are superior. Okay, so that's the main difference, okay? In my clinical experience, okay? I've used LEDs, I've used laser therapy, I've used everything. I like everything, okay? I like both. They both produce photons, and photons are good. I prefer laser diodes if I'm working, trying to target specific networks, trying to turn on specific things, right? For general health and wellness, LED's great, okay? But if we're trying to do something specifically in the brain, it seems like LED just takes longer in my clinical experience, okay? So you have to understand that there are classifications for safety of laser and light therapy. What they do is they take a measurement about the size of a pupil, okay? So if you can imagine, you know, a circle about the size of a pupil, and they shine the light in there, and then they measure how many photons come through that light, or I'm sorry, come through that aperture, right? So based on that, and they do this, again, the size of a pupil, because the most sensitive tissue to light is our retina. Okay, so that's going to be the tissue that we need to keep safe the most, right? Most people are not going to grab a laser and just stare into it, right? So pretty safe. And you'll see how safe it is later on, I'll show you. But basically, that's how they're measuring the safety class. So you have your class 1, considered non-hazardous. These are in things like DVD players, laser printers, so on. And then you have your class 2. These can be hazardous if viewed directly for long periods of time, using things like barcode readers. Think about that laser level, you know, at the hardware store that you can go get. Class 3R can be momentarily hazardous when directly viewed or when staring directly at the beam. Risk of injury increases when viewed with optical aids. This is like laser pointers, right? Class 3B. These are lasers emitting 5 milliwatts to 500 milliwatts of power at the point of measurement. These can be hazardous under direct beam viewing, right? So like this, that can be hazardous. Don't do that. All right, the class 3B is what our laser is, right? It's the shed light avant laser. A lot of therapy lasers are in fact the class 3B, okay? Class 4 is going to be more powerful, typically, you know, your 500 milliwatts or above. Obviously, these things can cut and burn and start fires and used in surgery and all these things. However, that really depends on the beam physics. What do I mean by that? So if you have a beam that come in and it focuses, right? It's converging, okay? That's going to produce a very hot beam. Think about going outside and using a magnifying glass and burning ants like when you were a kid, right? Or starting a fire with a piece of paper. You're magnifying the sun's rays by converging them, right? Same thing with lasers. I can actually take a class 2 device, and if I concentrate and focus that beam enough, it can become, you know, a powerful, you know, burning laser, if you will. Or you can take that really powerful class 4 and diverge the beam okay, diverge the beam, and now it's not going to be hazardous. Therapeutic lasers need to be divergent, right? Because you need a certain power to really evoke a physiological change. And the higher the power, the better, really, whenever we look at, you know, trying to get someone better faster. And so if we can diverge that beam, like ours has a 25-degree divergent beam, we can actually have a higher power with a lower safety rating, right? Because remember, it's the size of a pupil, we're shooting photons in it. So if our beam is diverging, less photons are going to go through there, right? So that divergent beam really makes a big difference in a therapy laser, right? And that's what we have. So those are your laser classifications, okay? All right, so what exactly happens when we use this laser and light therapy stuff, all right? So here's something to note right off the bat, okay? This stuff is non-invasive, non-carcinogenic, atraumatic, that means not traumatic, with no known side effects, okay? It's a therapy to many diseases and undesired conditions. That's amazing. Sometimes using these modalities, we can get a paradoxical reaction. I'll explain that a little more later. But basically, for this reason, laser and light therapy is referred to by many researchers as a regulator, okay? It's called the great regulator, leading the organism to homeostasis. That means balancing, right? So bringing everything into balance for that person, bringing life systems into balance. We need to be in balance, right? And allows for healing to take place, right? So an application in one site of the body can produce an improvement of condition in another body part. How cool is that? So there's studies where there's burn victims and they only laser one side of the body and the other side heals just as quick. Yet they still heal faster than the control group. How cool is that? So very safe, very effective, noted in the literature since 1960, all right? Thousands of studies. Here's one that I love to quote. This is Dr. Hamblin. He's one of the leading authorities in laser and light therapy research. He's out of Harvard, okay? So he's saying that, look, the almost complete lack of any adverse side effects of photobiomodulation, coupled with the growing disillusion with pharmaceutical drugs that affect brain function, have combined together to suggest an alternative physical therapy approach to improving brain function. That's a really powerful statement coming out of Harvard research. The almost complete lack of any adverse side effects. How many times can a medication say that? Not very often, okay? Actually, never, okay? So, very safe modality that produces dramatic change. So what happens when light interacts with tissue? So basically, the light hits the skin. It will either be absorbed, reflected, or scattered. Don't worry about that, okay? So all light will be absorbed to a certain degree, all right? The photons then interact with various chromophores, we'll talk about it, don't worry, to produce various biological effects based on the chromophore mostly affected due to the wavelength of light. So what is this thing called a chromophore? Glad you asked. Here's how it breaks down. We have chromophores all over our body, on the outside and on the inside, okay? Chromophores are like solar panels for your body. They receive photons, remember, turn a light on, it produces photons. Go outside, sun's producing photons, all right? So they receive photons and they turn around and they produce energy, just like a solar panel, all right? This is something that's in us. It's on our skin, it's in our brain, it's in our organs, it's in all over us, okay? All over us, all inside of us. We have solar panels that take this light and then produces energy so that we can heal faster and more efficiently. That's what it's doing, all right? Now, if we know what specific wavelength produces a certain type of effect and affects certain chromophores, we can start to leverage that information. And that's basically what we've done. Cool? So I'm a part of a project in the UK, and what I had to do was basically a meta-analysis and produce information that shows our lasers are safe and effective. And so this is something that I put together for that UK project, and it basically, all the things that I'm going to go over now, this is information that is found in the literature, okay? In the literature. So It increases mitochondrial membrane potential above above baseline. It increases electron transport, generates reactive oxygen species, generates nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is important. It dilates blood vessels and increases blood flow. It's ubiquitous in the research that laser and light therapy will increase blood flow in the body and in the brain. Super important. Increases cyclic AMP and intracellular calcium, activates transcription factors like NF-kappa B that up or down regulate genetics. You hear that? Up or down regulate. What did we say earlier about laser and light therapy? It's the great regulator. It's going to do what's needed. Cool. NF-kappa B, now here's one of those paradoxical things. NF-kappa B is known to be pro-inflammatory. So one would think that photobiomodulation is inflammatory. However, it's been shown that NF-kappa B was decreased in inflamed dendritic cells inside the brain, right? So what is that saying? Well, here's the thing. We need NF-kappa B for neuroplasticity, right? We have to have it, otherwise it won't happen. And so when you start using laser therapy, especially in the brain, you start to build up NF-kappa B, right? Well, wait a minute, that's pro-inflammatory. Yes, but you need it for neuroplasticity to occur, right? So remember, it's a great regulator. It's going to do what is needed, okay? It improves the gut microbiome, one of my favorite studies, okay? You shine this laser with the right wavelength, okay? This one was 808 nanometers, right? We have that in the laser, okay? And you see good bacteria go up and bad bacteria go down in the microbiome, in the gut. Very important. It heals the gut lining, okay? Changes levels of protein expression involved in antioxidant and redox regulation, anti-apoptic and pro-survival, cellular proliferation, etc. Structural proteins like collagen are synthesized to repair tissue. Stem cells are activated and begin to proliferate and differentiate, okay? Cells at risk of dying in tissue that has been subject to ischemia or lack of blood flow, okay, or other insults are protected. Very important, and that's why this is a great thing, you know, to get on someone at the onset of injury, because it's going to protect those neurons, those cells that there's been lack of blood flow. Is going to protect them. It also protects against chemical exposures. There's studies on that. It was done on Parkinson's. They would inject rats, it would cause Parkinson's, and then they would laser. They saw a neuroprotective effect from chemicals. Interesting. Pain and inflammation are reduced, blood flow is increased, lymphatic drainage is stimulated. This equates to tissue homeostasis, healing, and regeneration. Brain-specific effects, right? So all these are very specific to the brain. You have an increase in cerebral blood flow, increase in blood flow in the brain. Increase in tissue oxygenation, reduces activated microglia. Microglia are the resident immune cells in your brain. It's like Bruce Banner and the Hulk, right? You want your microglia to remain Bruce Banner, stay quiet. When there's an insult, a virus, bacteria, or you get hit or something like that, microglia then turn to the Hulk and they go and they tear up that virus or bacteria. They clean up an area, right? But then they should turn quickly back into Bruce Banner. But what happens with prolonged injury is that you have the microglia running around like the Hulk. And what does a Hulk like to do? Hulk smash, right? The Hulk is going to start to tear up good tissue too, right? So this is good that it reduces these activated microglia. It's going to reduce neurological inflammation, increase neurogenesis, increase synaptogenesis. So it's going to make neurons and make new connections. It'll increase growth factors, increase angiogenesis, making new blood vessels, increases anti-apoptosis, which is great, decreases edema or swelling, increases antioxidants like SOD and glutathione, and it's going to heal the blood-brain barrier. It's been demonstrated to improve autistic symptoms and behavior, shown to reduce viral replication and improve immune response, activates or inhibits brain network firing. That's awesome. Has an effect on functional connectivity, network activity via use of frequencies and pulsations of light. And that's something that's very specific to what we do, is that we use certain frequencies, right, to affect different tissues within the body. We've got like 500 different settings. I kind of lost count. But each of them is specific to a certain set of frequencies to produce a different effect in the body. can rapidly reduce or eliminate primitive reflexes when properly applied. I'll show you that later. Here's a cool diagram, not showing everything I just talked about, obviously. And then here's your citations. For you left brainers, I'm going to go and look up all this information. Here it is, and there's that. I threw this slide in there just to show you how the research is booming right now on laser and light therapy and photobiomodulation. Last I checked, so this is actually from 2014, but last I checked, laser and light therapy, as far as dollars spent on research, is only second to stem cells. So there's a lot of research going on right now on photobiomodulation. Now, one question that is consistently asked, not just in you know, the layperson community, but very much so in the provider community. Like other doctors ask me this all the time. Does laser and light penetrate the skull, right? Several studies. I lost count. I can't tell you how many, but a lot of studies have answered this, and it's a very resounding yes. Laser and light therapy does in fact penetrate the skull. Think of it this way. The skull's living tissue, right? The skull's living tissue. Therefore, it has what? Chromophores, right? We already covered this. Chromophores like solar panels. It's going to receive light, it's going to transmit it, right? So yes, it's going to penetrate the skull. But here's a cool study. In the study that said, moreover, the percentage of fluence in gray and white matter proved the light penetration is deep into cerebral tissue. And here's a cool visual for that, right? Using the laser and light therapy and seeing it penetrate into the brain. So yes, it does penetrate the skull. Now, how does the laser produce almost immediate changes? One of my favorite topics to talk about. I want to show you a couple of videos first. And what we're doing is we're checking primitive reflexes, okay? So I'm going to show you in the first video. This is Dr. Rob Malillo and my business partner, Kyle Daigle. They're in his office. And what Dr. Malillo is going to do is he's going to check an asymmetric tonic neck reflex. You'll see when you turn the head that the elbow will bend, and this is going to be a positive reflex that should not be there, right? So in anyone over 1 to 2 years old, we should not see these primitive reflexes. So obviously if it's there, it's showing lack of integration in the brain. And what he's going to then do is use the laser, okay, over the suspected unintegrated part of the brain, which in this case is going to be the right frontal lobe. And then what he's going to do is show how the laser has a hemispheric effect on the brain. So then he's going to use it on the left, okay? And he's going to see, we're going to see that reflex first go away when we use it over the correct area, and then come back when we use it over the area that's stronger at the, so we need to increase the strength of the right. We need to see the left part does not need, to be strengthened. Actually may need to be balanced down a little bit, right? So we may need to see kind of a balancing act go on. So let's watch this.
He's got an 18R, and he does go classic 18R on both sides bilaterally. You might want to take it a little bit shooting this way, Jason, okay, so we can see both. Right, so we want to see if the laser is going to have any sort of effect. So we're going to put it, just stay just like that for me, John, please. Okay. Go over the right frontal lobe. Since we think John has more of a right brain deficit, but we're going to use it for a little while. Ultimately, the frontal lobe is what inhibits the primitive reflexes, so we want to look at that, towards that.
Or do you want to do the...
We'll try, we don't know how much time, but let's try now and let's see what happens. Okay. Clear improvement, we need to use a little bit more.
You want to do the rail? Okay, look at the rail for me.
We can also try different spots to see if the parietal lobe looks better and the temporal lobe looks better. You can try to different locations.
Oh, you don't like astronauts anymore?
And then try it again.
You are on a ship.
Okay, almost gone. So now let's look if we do it on the other side to see if the laser is having an actual hemispheric effect directly on the hemisphere.
Sit back, Charlie. Sit back.
So we'll put it on this side, keep your arm like that. Again, we'll put it more towards the frontal lobe area.
He can't see you. This is what he's thinking. Right. You sure you don't want to do it?
Wow, look at Charlie, loves it.
Oh, it's your turn now?
Oh my goodness, he's right behind you.
Okay, let's try it again. Okay. Good job.
No, sir.
You can see that 18 hours back.
As soon as he finishes, you can do
So
it, okay?
it appears as a hemispheric effect from the laser, which is really cool to see.
Put your back.
Direct hemispheric.
Okay. Now here, what I also teach is we can actually use the laser as a diagnostic tool. And so this video is me actually using it as kind of a diagnostic tool where I'm working with a kiddo that has autism, and we're getting to a place to where he kind of plateaued. And what I'm trying to do is decide, you know, is it time to work on a different network in the brain? And now how do I identify that? Because I was kind of having trouble, you know, identifying the exact network that I need to work on. And so I'm going to use a primitive reflex, all right, again, the ATNR reflex. I'm going to go through various points. I'm going to look at what's called the rhombencephalon. Back here is the cerebellum, pons, and medulla. And if these terms are, you know, new to you, then be sure and catch the other lecture I'm going to do where I talk about developmental functional neurology. I'm going to break the brain stem down and all this kind of stuff, right? So I'm going to use it over the rhombencephalon and see it doesn't change. I'm going to go to the right side of the brain, the frontal lobe area, see that it doesn't do that big of a change. It kind of does, but then it comes back. And actually switch over and go to the left temporal lobe area, and it completely eliminates the reflex. And so this is kind of a longer video, but I want you to see how we can use the laser.
You can go ahead and start, because I don't know, it'll be kind of hard to catch maybe. Okay. All right, bud. Oh, turn the light on. All right, dude, you ready? Here we go. Here we go. So we get a little bit there. There it is. All right, so now we'll go here. You doing good today, Reed Man? You doing good today?
What?
You're good. You still going? Yeah. Good. All right, Reed Man. About to recheck you, buddy. What are you doing? What are you doing, monkey? All right. Okay, there's 40 seconds there. Okay. All right, let's go back down your hands and knees, bud. Excellent. Still got that. Okay, now I'm gonna go here. Doing good, Reed. Thanks, bud. So try the left cerebellum brainstem area first. Now we're going to try right frontal lobe. All right, Reed Man, let's go back down. Let's try again. Let's try again, buddy. You ready?
Yeah.
Here we go. So that looks better. Let's try again, okay, bub? You're doing great. Yeah. You see a difference? Ah.
He fooled me.
Let's play with this a little bit, Reed. You're almost done, bud. You're doing great. Thanks. Okay with you, buddy? Let's check again. You're doing great. Thanks, Reed, man. Wow.
Yeah.
So we gotta switch over to some left temporal lobe, huh?
Wow.
Why didn't you tell me, Reed? Look at that. Dude, good job.
So there you go. And that's how we can use it to find the specific network that we need to be working on at that point in time. Pretty cool. So how does this happen? So you just saw two examples of how we can make really quick changes within the brain. Anyone that's been doing primitive reflex work is really just kind of perplexed whenever they see a video like that of us, because you can do primitive reflex work for months or years before you start to see them diminish like that, right? We do it in a matter of minutes, okay? So what happens is the main two ways, right? There's several things to talk about with this, but the main two I want to point at is you alter the mitochondrial membrane potential, okay? This allows for better energy production and cellular respiration, but it also increases the voltage, okay? So I want to talk about voltage a little bit more. So we are electrical beings. There's a book called The Body Electric by Dr. Becker. That's a really good read, and it really goes into detail about this. When I say voltage, think electrons, okay? Voltage actually equates to pH. We're going to talk about that. Cells are actually designed to run between a pH of 7.35 to 7.45. This is coming from the biology textbooks. You know, doctors are trained to monitor things like temperature, you know, our blood sugar, blood pressure, oxygen, but nobody's really talking about or monitoring the pH. Yet there's standards. There's normative data that shows we should be. And ultimately, if we can identify how to heal and sustain one cell, we can determine how to heal and sustain our body, right? And so this is, you know, many of you have spent some time with me and you've heard my story about, you know, not feeling well. I was having some health issues, possibly some thyroid cancer stuff going on. And I decided, you know, to get out from under all the stress and sell everything, my practice, everything. We moved to Costa Rica. And this was my premise. If I could figure out how to heal one cell, I could heal them all, right? So obviously, when I moved to Costa Rica, I studied the Bible a lot. I got real close to God. But I also was outside. I was in the ocean. I was eating clean, healthy foods. You know, I wasn't taking supplements. I wasn't taking medication. And I was raising my voltage, right? And ultimately, when I came back, my labs were normal. I felt great. So let's talk about how that works. So here's that normative data I was telling you about. So we know glucose, there's numbers for that, body temperature, blood pressure, oxygen. But again, no one's really talking about pH or voltage, okay? So pH and voltage, something to note is that there's different types of pain that come on with this whenever your voltage is low and when your voltage is high or increasing. We'll talk about that. So we really are just a big bag of water, right? So we're about 70% water, but water makes up 99% of our molecules. Interesting. By measuring the voltage of a solution using a voltometer, you can then convert the voltage into pH using a logarithmic scale. So here's what it looks like. So pH, we know that 7 is neutral. Anything under 7 is considered acidic. Anything from 7 to 14 is basic or alkaline, right? So when we raise the voltage, the healing occurs as we become more alkaline, okay? So let's talk about it. So again, with this understanding, we can see that a pH of 7.35 is the same as a voltage of minus 20. A pH of 7.45 is the same thing as a voltage of minus 25. Thus, we see that all cellular biology texts tell us that cells are designed to run between minus 20 and minus 25 millivolts. biology text, right? That's not my opinion. The following chart begins to help us, and this is from Dr. Jerry Tennant's book, by the way, who is a great resource. He has some stuff on YouTube you can go look up as well. This begins to help us understand the difference between electron donors and electron stealers. Okay, so an electron stealer is going to be that acidic range, that 0 to 7 range. It's acidic. These are your free radicals, all right? They're destructive. They don't do good things. Your electron donors, okay, they're there. They can do work. They can give electrons. When you give an electron, you raise the voltage to heal, right? It's your pH from 7 to 14. This is your alkaline, okay? These are your antioxidants, okay? A free radical is a molecule that is missing electrons. It's like a mugger looking for someone's purse to steal. When a free radical steals electrons from the cell, it damages the cell. An antioxidant is a molecule capable of giving away electrons. Thus, when your mother says, eat your veggies, she's saying that the vegetables contain electrons that are good for you. Maybe, or she's just saying eat your veggies. Who knows? Here's a cool chart to note. So we see normal for adults is that minus 25 millivolt range. Normal for kids is a little higher. Why? Because they're growing, right? So their cells need to replicate more. We need to make new cells at minus 50. Okay, if we don't get there, we don't make new cells. Okay, it doesn't matter if it's a bone cell, a brain cell, a gut cell, a liver cell, doesn't matter. If you don't get to minus 50 millivolts, you don't make new cells. Okay, so you're stuck in a state of chronic ill health. Okay, minus 15, you're tired. Who's tired out there? Okay, minus 10, you're sick. Once you get into the positives, plus 30, this is where cancer occurs. You can measure the voltage of cancerous tumors, and they're around plus 30 millivolts. So how can we determine pH, right? So your salivary and your urinary pH are about 0.8 pH units less than cellular pH. So urinary pH is a rough indicator of the voltage of fluids around the cells. At normal, both urinary and salivary pH should be about 6.5, okay? If you add 6.5 to 0.8, you get 7.3, which is your minus 20 millivolts, right? So you can start measuring urinary and salivary pH to start to gauge where you're at. This is a very important slide to note, especially if you're dealing with any type of anoxic or hypoxic brain injury. This is a very, very important subject to note, very important slide. So basically the amount of oxygen that can be dissolved into water, remember we're mostly water, is dictated by the water's voltage. As you increase the voltage of the water, or you make it more alkaline, the amount of oxygen that can absorb into the water increases, okay? And again, remember, we're 70% water, or we should be. As voltage drops, so does our oxygen levels at the cellular level. Okay? ATP, which is your fuel source, right? It's like the gasoline for your cells. ATP provides electrons to keep the cell functioning. Once ATP discharges, it becomes ADP. When oxygen is available for every unit of fatty acid that runs through the Krebs cycle, right? Okay, so the Krebs cycle is a way for our cells to generate ATP, or our gasoline, all right? So whenever a unit of fatty acid runs through the Krebs cycle, we can create 38 molecules of ATP if oxygen's available. If oxygen is not present, we only generate 2 molecules of ATP, right? So think of it like a car. It's a car that either gets 38 miles per gallon versus a car that gets 2 miles per gallon, right? There's a big difference in how far that car is going to go, okay? So we need oxygen present for several reasons, but obviously we're not going to heal to our greatest potential if we're stuck, in an acidic or low voltage state, because we don't have enough oxygen for our Krebs cycle to really produce enough ATP, aka gasoline, for our cells to heal, right? So to summarize this information, if you're in a low voltage state, you have less oxygen at the cellular level, less ATP or fuel, energy for your cell to function. This is not going to allow for, a very fun life, and healing is not going to take place to its fullest potential, okay? If we cannot achieve a voltage of minus 50, we cannot make new cells. If we cannot make new cells, we will be stuck in chronic pain or disease, or just simply won't develop or fully heal, okay? One basic building block to achieving better health is to raise one's voltage. This is based on physiologic fact, okay? When we begin to raise the voltage, remember that one may feel a pulsing pain temporarily. This is different from the chronic pain that you feel in the low voltage state. This is dependent on the type of tissue, but I personally have seen this with many patients, especially the chronic pain patients, and especially with, again, with the anoxic brain injury crowd or any type of brain injury, really, where you have a muscle tone problem, muscle contracture, spasticity, all these things. Whenever we start to work with someone, oftentimes I'll tell them, beware, you're going to start to feel your body more. Why do I say that? I say that because I know that as voltage raises, it can become painful. But we have to go through this in order to heal. And it's transient. It's not going to be long, it's not going to last forever, okay? But we have to go through this. We have to raise voltage for things to heal, okay? Think about, when you fall asleep, when you wake up and you can't feel your arm, and then when blood flow starts to come back, it gets all numb and tingly and feels like needles are in it, right? That's that return of blood flow and oxygen into that extremity that had none. Very similar process. Okay, so pain can simply be a symptom of abnormal voltage and or normal healing. Ways to increase voltage. Obviously, laser and light therapy can do it. It's what I've been talking about this whole time. What people don't really realize is that Albert Einstein actually won a Nobel Prize for discovering the photoelectric effect, okay? So this is a cool article. It actually came out of the University of Texas here in Austin. Even though I'm an Aggie, I'll still talk about it. It's okay. And basically what it says is that when I turn this on, okay, when I turn this on and these photons come screaming out and they hit my tissue at the cellular, at the molecular level, the photon is going to prefer to interact with the electron. Okay, so remember you have the nucleus of the atom and then the electrons are spinning around it, okay? We need those electrons in order to facilitate healing, in order to increase voltage, right? So these photons are gonna come screaming in. They prefer the electron, so they come and they bump on the electron. Now that electron is going to jump into a higher orbit, or it's gonna be pushed out of its orbit and go into the tissue. When that happens, you have an electron and you raise voltage, okay? So that's the photoelectric effect. To my knowledge, I was the only one to talk about this in the photobiomodulation field. I've been talking about it for several years now. Finally, in 2020, there was a research article that came out discussing the photoelectric effect with photobiomodulation. First time, okay? Pretty cool. Other ways for you to increase your voltage. Obviously, laser and light therapy. Hug, right? When we hug each other, there's a transfer of energy. Very important, okay? That's why whenever someone comes over, right, and they leave and you're like, oh my God, I'm so tired. That was an electron stealer that just came over to your place. They took all your electrons. Now you're tired. You know those people. All right. Pets, the pets like curl up in your lap and stuff. They're giving you some good electrons, good stuff. Alkaline water obviously is great. Take a good quality multi-mineral. That's one of the best things. One of the, I put everyone in my office on minerals pretty much. Okay. This is why. Eat unprocessed real food. If you process it, if it's not real food, it doesn't have nutrients, it doesn't have electrons, it doesn't have all these good coenzymes and all these good things. Eat real food. Very simple. Take a shower rather than a bath. Okay? Who wants to wash their face with the same water you wash your butt with anyway? I mean, come on. Jump in a natural body of water, lakes, oceans, rivers, okay? Barefoot grounding, roll around in the grass. It's a good thing. Exercise. So this is really cool. There's something called a piezoelectric effect. Whenever you squeeze a material or a substance, it emits electrons. Same thing with muscles. When you squeeze a muscle, when you contract a muscle, it emits an electron or electrons, okay? So my theory is that there's a huge connection with primitive reflex integration and the piezoelectric effect, because what happens is a sensory stimulus causes muscle contractions in a certain pattern that generates electrons into things like acupuncture meridians, organs, various tissues, the brain, all these things, and heals and develops the brain, okay? So that's my theory. So our muscles are kind of like our own rechargeable batteries, super cool. Dosage. Let's just talk about dosage for a little bit because, again, this is another one of those little marketing things that people are going to use to try and scare you into buying their product. So I just want you to kind of have a grasp about how dosage really works. So this is coming out of a great book. This is in the literature. I have the book there in the corner. Unfortunately, many researchers fail to accurately measure and report these parameters, so the literature is unreliable on the topic of dose. It doesn't mean we shouldn't use the research. It doesn't mean we shouldn't look at it. We should, and we should be doing research, and this is good. But we should always focus on our patient, right? We should always focus on the person in front of us. And again, be able to calculate the effective dose rather than just the fluence. That's the important concept here. Some other things to note. If irradiance is too low and time is too short, no significant effects are observed. If dose is too great, there seems to be an inhibitory effect on results. However, these effects then play catch up after this inhibitory stint. Quoting from the research. In other words, the cognitive scores of the mice that had received the TBI followed by 14 photobiomodulation sessions were lower than TBI controls at 4 weeks, but changed to being higher than TBI controls at 8 weeks. So what went on there? Remember I said, whenever you start to laser, you start to accumulate NF kappa B. That's what we're seeing. So you laser, NF kappa B begins to build up. Yes, it can be slightly pro-inflammatory, okay? And then over time, you use that NF kappa B for neuroplastic change. And so you see, yes, you have a slight inhibitory effect and then you take off, right? So that's what we're seeing in the research there. Clinical studies usually treat for 1 to 30 minutes. We'll use multiple applications, most report in the 1 to 18 range. One published case study on a patient who had been in a persistent vegetative state for 8 months. He received 146 treatments twice a day for 73 days and then started showing signs of movement, right? So basically it's like this. Dosage, it matters. What matters more? What matters more is a person in front of you. What matters more is being able to identify what that person needs. And again, I teach this. We do things like O2 saturation monitoring, heart rate monitoring, blood pressure, muscle tone, primitive reflexes, eye movements. All of these things tell us when to laser, when not to laser, where not to laser, and all these things, right? So is it complicated? Kind of, but really, no. Once you understand the guidelines, you understand what's going on, okay? Remember, what did we discuss first? It's extremely safe. Harvard says it's one of the safest modalities you can use on your brain, okay? That's the important thing to take home here. So what do we know that lasers can do thus far, right? So we know it's going to improve cellular energy, oxygenation, and voltage. It's going to speed up healing, reduce healing time. It's going to make new neurons, neurogenesis, make new brain connections, synaptogenesis, increase blood flow, reduce pain, reduce and modulate inflammation, reduce autoimmunity, improve the microbiome, okay? Encourage oscillation patterns in the brain, kind of wake the brain up. Reduce infective load, we didn't talk about that a whole lot, but it will. Improve the immune response. Normalize muscle tone and neurological tone. It has a broad range of efficacy and safety, okay? A broad range and many more things, right? So, laser and light therapy, that's what I got to tell you, right? So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to give you the nuts and the bolts, right? I want you to understand what it is, how it works. That way you can apply this for your situation, okay? Because that's what's really important. So, let me get out of here. Uh-oh. Where'd I go? I'm still going. Where'd I go? There'd I go. Okay, there I am. Oops. So now you can take this information and apply it to you how you want to do it. You know, and again, I wanted to get rid of a lot of those misconceptions, a lot of those marketing ploys, and just give you the raw information, okay? So I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, bye.